Hi, everyone. Today we're going to talk about the English Restoration, the time period and world in which Aphra Behn's The Rover was written and performed. And before we do that, we kind of need to figure out what was going on that created this very specific period of English cultural time. So one of the things I want to do is start off by talking about the English Civil War, which, as you can see from this photograph, is still reenacted today in England, the same way we do with the U.S. Civil War. But this war lasts from 1642 to 1649. And pits Puritans, also known as Roundheads. They're called Roundheads because they cut their hair relatively short so you can see how round their heads are. That's not why they cut their hair short. It's just a choice. But there you go, Roundheads. The Roundheads essentially are fed up with the royal opulence of the other side of this battle, which is fought by the Royalists or the Cavaliers. And here you see King Charles I pictured in the painting. And he's the guy who succeeds James I, who succeeded Elizabeth I. So we were in great shape under Elizabeth, and things sort of slid a little out of control by the time we get to Charles I. Basically, you have a very entitled nobility, and I've got that little thing down there. God said we're noble, so we can do whatever the heck we want, right? You have an entitled nobility that is disconnected from the common everyday people, and that is spending a lot of money on parties and basically being overly excessive. The Puritans get fed up with this, and they round up a whole lot of people and obviously go to war. So we have a 7-year period of England in complete chaos and tumult throughout this period of the Civil War. It ends in 1649 with Roundhead victory. To demonstrate, there's Charles I and there's Charles I's head. So the Roundheads clearly win, which causes Charles Jr. or Charles II to be spirited away to France, where he spends a lot of time hanging out in the court of Louis XIV at Versailles. So here's a very European-influenced monarch in Charles I. The Brits don't like that. There's a rebellion. They behead him. His kid runs off to France and hangs out there for a while and learns more of that European French opulence. In the meanwhile, he's replaced with Oliver Cromwell, who is made the Lord Protector. And Cromwell's a Puritan military leader, among other things. And he basically becomes a dictator for a little while. And so we have this period after Charles I is beheaded and before Charles II is restored to the throne. The period where Cromwell rules is called the Interregnum. Inter between regnum means periods when somebody reigned. So in the Interregnum, a couple of interesting things happen. In 1642, as soon as this war begins, Puritans go around closing the theaters. Here's a picture of William Prynne, who's one of many, many, many Puritan people. But basically, all of this rich theatrical culture that had developed under Elizabeth, and Shakespeare's been dead for a long time now, but there are still lots of plays going on. It's all shut down almost immediately at the beginning of the war. And as the tide ebbs and flows, that comes and goes. But basically, theater ends in England in 1642. There are a handful of other places where it continues, but pretty much it's shut down. In 1649, once things are over, official legal decrees state that actors are to be arrested. So now you can go to jail just for being an actor. Every remaining playhouse, and the ones listed, the Fortune, the Cockpit, the Salisbury Court, is to be demolished. So imagine the staggering amount of English theatrical history that just vanishes when these things are knocked down. And generally speaking, theater continues in private homes, in various innyards and nobles' tennis courts, but really theater dies during the Civil War and for most of the Interregnum. We have a really dark period in English theatrical history. My question for you, and we'll talk about this in class, why did the Puritans hate theater so much? Because they shut it down immediately, and then once they get fully in charge in 1649, they make legal decrees that say, nope, really, this is done, we're not kidding. What about Puritan culture causes them to distrust or really dislike theater so radically? So possibly make an annotation here and let me know what you think. So here's what happens next. In 1658, Cromwell dies, so we'll get him out of there. And in 1660, a royalist army enters England. Numerous people who have been loyal to Charles II have been amassing an army on the continent, and this is basically a bloodless revolution where the Puritan government pretty much says, all right, look, we're tired of running the show, bring back in a king, let's have a parliament and a king and a nice balance between the two, and we can make it work. So what happens here, and here on the left is a royalist general welcoming Charles II back from France, and here on the right is a painting of Charles II's official coronation in London. So we have Charles II restored to the throne, ergo the Restoration. Here are some very telling portraits of our boy Charles II. He's been hanging out, like I said, in France, and he's become very French in a lot of his ways. Go ahead and take a look at our old images of Louis XIII and Louis XIV. You can see a lot of cultural similarities here. And that French, opulent, indulgent European culture is really basically what Charles II brings back to England when he is restored to the throne. External appearance, opulence, spending, all kinds of good stuff. Here is, I love this painting. This is Charles II of England being given the first pineapple grown in England by his royal gardener, John Rose. So just a couple layers here of opulence here, right? The idea that you would go to the lengths required to grow pineapples in England, where they don't naturally grow, says, well, I'm a king. I would like to have anything in my hand whenever I want it. So just the idea of pineapples is kind of a little bit of opulence, although it may not seem like it. But thing number two is, not only am I going to do this, but I'm going to have a painting made of the event where I am presented with the first pineapple. So what we have here during the Restoration is a period of basically European nobility, Baroque influences, opulence a little bit, and a handful of other cultural traits that are very similar to what was going on, especially in France at the time. So my first discussion question for you is, how does the play reflect these noble European, possibly even Baroque influences? What is opulent about the rover? Make an annotation here and we'll talk about it in class.